Right after my husband's funeral, we gathered at a restaurant. As I sat down, my stepdaughter snickered. "Find another seat. This table is for real family, not gold-digging second wives." They all chuckled. I just dropped an envelope on the table. "Your father left me this letter. Read it before you get too comfortable." The looks on their faces were priceless. Emily reached for it first, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the wood. She was 34, a lawyer who wore her profession like armor, designer suits, and an air of superiority that made people step back when she entered a room. Her brother James sat beside her, scrolling through his phone even now, minutes after burying his father. The funeral director had barely closed the casket before James checked the stock market. He was 29, a commercial real estate broker who measured everything in dollar signs and profit margins. "What is this?" Emily asked, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Open it," I said, keeping my tone level, emotionless. Rebecca, James's wife, leaned forward with that practiced smile she wore like a mask. She had the kind of face that smiled automatically, even when her eyes stayed cold and calculating. She'd been married to James for 3 years, and in that time, she'd perfected the art of looking concerned while mentally tallying up assets. "This seems inappropriate, Margaret. We just buried Richard." "Then you should have thought about that before making jokes about gold digging." I stood up slowly, gathering my black coat and purse. "Read the letter. Don't read it. I don't care anymore." The restaurant was one of those upscale places that Richard's children loved, all white tablecloths and overpriced wine. The kind of place where they could be seen by the right people, where status mattered more than substance. Richard had hated it. He'd been a carpenter, a man who built things with his hands and measured success by the quality of his work, not the thickness of his wallet. I walked out of that restaurant and didn't look back. Behind me, I heard the sound of paper tearing, voices rising in confusion and then anger. Let them fight over it. Let them wonder what Richard wrote in those final weeks when the cancer ate through him and he finally saw his children clearly for what they'd become. The Maine winter hit me as I stepped outside. February cold, the kind that goes through your coat and settles in your bones and makes you wonder if you'll ever feel warm again. The parking lot was half empty, scattered with dirty snow and ice. I'd lived in this town for 30 years, married to Richard for 12 of them. His first wife died when the kids were teenagers, a car accident that left them bitter and resentful of anyone who tried to fill that empty space. I came along when they were already adults, already convinced they knew everything, already certain I wanted their inheritance. They were right about one thing. I did want something, but it wasn't money. My car was an older Honda, 10 years old with a dent in the passenger door from where I'd hit a mailbox last winter. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed gold digger. I started the engine and sat there for a moment, letting it warm up, watching the restaurant door through my rearview mirror. Emily burst out first, her face red even in the cold. James followed, phone pressed to his ear, already calling someone. Rebecca trailed behind, looking confused and worried. Good. Let them worry. Let them scramble. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove home through the grey February afternoon, past the houses Richard had built, past the lumberyard where he'd bought his materials for 40 years, past the elementary school where he'd once taught a woodworking class to kids who couldn't afford supplies. This town knew Richard. They respected him. And soon, very soon, they'd know what his children had done to him. My house sat on the edge of town, a small Cape Cod with weathered grey shingles and a garden I'd neglected since Richard got sick. The driveway needed ploughing, but I'd gotten lazy about it. Richard had always handled the snow removal, getting up at dawn with his old plough attachment to clear a path before I woke up. Now I did it myself, or I paid the neighbor's teenager $20 to do it when the drifts got too high. Inside, everything was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes you aware of every small sound, the furnace clicking on, the refrigerator humming, the house settling around you like it's preparing for a long hibernation. I made coffee in the old percolator Richard had bought at a yard sale 20 years ago. It made terrible coffee, but it was his, so I kept using it. While it brewed, I sat at the kitchen table, the same oak table where Richard and I had eaten breakfast every morning for 12 years. He'd made it himself, of course. He made most of the furniture in this house: the table, the chairs, the bookshelf in the living room, the bed frame upstairs. Everything in this house had his fingerprints on it. Everything carried his touch. The letter I'd dropped on the restaurant table was a copy. I had the original in my safe deposit box at the bank, along with other documents Richard had signed in those final months. Documents his children knew nothing about. Documents that would change everything. Richard had been a carpenter, a good one. He built half the houses in this town, including the modern monstrosity where James lived with Rebecca. That house was all glass and steel and sharp angles, the kind of place that looked impressive in magazines, but felt cold and lifeless when you actually stepped inside. Emily's condo in Portland came from Richard's money too, though she liked to pretend her lawyer salary paid for everything. She worked at a small firm that handled estates and trusts, mostly for wealthy families who wanted to avoid taxes and keep their money away from the government. They'd been waiting for him to die. I saw it in their faces during those last hospital visits, the way they looked at him like he was already gone, like his body was just going through the motions of shutting down, the way they calculated, the way they asked pointed questions about his will, about his accounts, about the business properties he owned, about everything he'd built over 57 years of hard work. They never asked how he felt. They never asked if he was in pain. They never sat with him in the middle of the night when the morphine wore off and he couldn't sleep, when he wanted to talk about his life and his regrets, and the things he wished he'd done differently. I was there for all of that, every single night. I sipped my terrible coffee and waited. The phone would ring soon. I knew Emily. She was a lawyer, which meant she was trained to find leverage, to identify weaknesses, to attack from the angle that would cause the most damage. She'd call first, before James, because she'd want to control the narrative, to set the terms of engagement. It rang at 8:30, right on schedule. "You have no right," Emily said. "No greeting, no preamble, no pretense at civility. Just straight to the accusation. Your father wrote that letter himself, every word. He was on medication, morphine, fentanyl, God knows what else. He wasn't thinking clearly. Any court would throw this out. The doctors confirmed his mental competency 2 weeks before he died. It's all documented. Dr. Peterson signed off on it personally. So did the hospice nurse, the social worker, and a notary public. Your father made sure it was ironclad." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, could almost see her lawyer brain working through the implications, looking for the weakness in my defense. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "Nothing you can give me." "Everyone wants something, Margaret. Name your price." "I don't want your money. I don't want your apology. I don't want anything from you." "Then why are you doing this?" "Because your father asked me to." I hung up before she could respond. The letter was simple, just 2 pages in Richard's shaky handwriting. He'd written it 3 weeks before he died, on a day when the pain wasn't too bad and his mind was clear. I'd sat with him while he wrote it, watching his hand move slowly across the paper, forming words that would detonate like grenades in his children's lives. The letter explained that he'd discovered certain financial irregularities over the past 5 years. Money missing from joint accounts he shared with James for the business. Legal fees Emily charged to his credit card for personal matters, not estate planning like she claimed. Small things, they probably thought. 1,000 here, 5,000 there. Over 5 years, it added up to almost $200,000. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was buried in the second paragraph, where Richard wrote about finding emails on James's laptop, emails between James and Emily, discussing how to have their father declared incompetent. They wanted control of his assets while he was still alive, wanted to put him in a nursing home. They'd actually made a plan. Richard found those emails by accident. James had borrowed his father's laptop because his own was being repaired, and when Richard got it back, James's email account was still logged in. Richard saw the subject line: Dad's situation, legal options. He never told them he knew. He never confronted them. He just started documenting everything, keeping records, building a case like a detective preparing for trial. And then he got sick. The cancer came fast and brutal, stage 4 pancreatic cancer that the doctor said was inoperable and incurable. 6 months, they told him, maybe less. He made it 8 months, and in those 8 months he prepared for war. I spent the next week organizing. Richard had left me detailed instructions in a notebook he kept hidden in his workshop, a leather-bound journal filled with dates and names and account numbers, a roadmap for destroying his children's lives in a way that looked entirely legal and justified. I followed his instructions carefully, methodically, the way he'd taught me to approach any complex project. First step, gather the evidence. Second step, identify the targets. Third step, execute with precision. First, I called his accountant, a man named Donald Brennan, who'd worked with Richard for 25 years. Donald was 63, with grey hair and wire-rimmed glasses, and the patient demeanor of someone who'd seen every kind of family drama play out in spreadsheets and tax returns. I need copies of everything, I said when I called him the Monday after the funeral. Richard told me you'd call, Donald said. His voice was kind but not surprised. He actually came to see me about 6 weeks before he died. Said he wanted to make sure everything was organized for you. Can I come by today? I have everything ready. Come by at 2. Donald's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, all dark wood and creaky floors and the smell of old paper and coffee. His secretary, a woman named Linda who'd been with him for 30 years, gave me a sympathetic smile as I walked in. I'm so sorry about Richard, she said. He was a good man. Yes, he was. Donald met me in his office on the 2nd floor. He was wearing a cardigan over his dress shirt, and his desk was covered with neat stacks of folders and papers. Everything about Donald suggested order, precision, control. I need copies of everything, I repeated. Bank statements, cancelled checks, credit card bills, everything Richard had access to regarding his accounts with James and Emily. Donald handed me a thick folder, easily 3 inches of paper. Inside were bank statements going back 5 years, cancelled checks, credit card bills, and a detailed spreadsheet Richard had compiled himself, probably sitting at this very desk while Donald watched. Every withdrawal, every suspicious charge, every piece of evidence that his children had been stealing from him, all organized by date and amount and category. There's enough here for a civil lawsuit, Donald said carefully. Maybe criminal charges, depending on how far you want to take it. Theft from a vulnerable adult, financial exploitation, possibly fraud. I don't want their money. Then what do you want? I want them to understand what they did. I want everyone to know who they really are. Donald nodded slowly, like he'd expected this answer. Richard said you'd say something like that. He also said to tell you to be careful. Emily's a lawyer. She knows how to fight, and she won't go down easy. Neither will I. I don't doubt that. He leaned back in his chair, studying me over his glasses. You know this will destroy them, right? Their careers, their reputations, everything. This town will never forgive them once word gets out. Good. Most people would feel some hesitation about that. Donald was quiet for a moment. He died alone. I was there, but his children weren't. James had a business dinner he said he couldn't miss. Emily had a court appearance that got postponed anyway. Rebecca didn't even bother with an excuse. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just give me what I need to make them pay for it. I took the folder and made 3 copies at the print shop on Main Street. The teenager working there looked at me curiously as I fed pages through the machine, but he didn't ask questions. Small towns teach you when to mind your own business. One copy went into my safe deposit box at the bank. One went to my lawyer, Susan Whitmore, a woman who'd handled my affairs before I married Richard and had watched this whole situation unfold with a mixture of concern and fascination. The third I kept at home, in a fireproof safe Richard had installed in the basement years ago. Then I started making phone calls. James worked at a commercial real estate firm in Portland called Patterson and Associates. He'd gotten the job through Richard's connections, though he liked to pretend he'd earned it himself through merit and hard work. His boss was a man named Frank Patterson, someone Richard had known since high school. They'd played football together, double-dated in college, stood up at each other's weddings. Frank owed Richard. They all did. This whole town was built on Richard's work, his generosity, his willingness to help people when they needed it. I called Frank on Monday morning, after I'd gotten the documents from Donald. "Margaret, I'm so sorry about Richard," Frank said when his secretary put me through. His voice was thick with genuine grief. He was one of the best men I ever knew. "Thank you, Frank. I'm calling because I need to discuss something about James." There was a pause, subtle but noticeable. "Is something wrong?" "That depends on your perspective. Did you know James was using company resources to run a side business last year?" Another pause, longer this time. I could hear papers rustling on his desk. "What kind of side business?" "Property flipping. He was using your office, your phone lines, your client contacts to find deals. Then he'd buy the properties himself under an LLC he set up and resell them for profit. He never disclosed this to you or the firm. Richard found out about it 6 months ago when he saw some documents James left at the house." "That's a serious accusation, Margaret." "I have documentation. Richard kept records of everything. Phone logs showing calls James made from the office to contractors and sellers. Email printouts showing him using his company email to conduct personal business. Even photos of documents James left on his desk that Richard saw during a visit to the office last year." "Why are you telling me this now? Why didn't Richard bring it up when he was alive?" "Because Richard didn't want to embarrass you while he was alive. He knew it would reflect badly on your firm, but he thought you should know what kind of person you were employing, and he asked me to tell you after he was gone." I could hear Frank breathing on the other end of the line, processing this information, weighing his options. He was a businessman, pragmatic and careful. He'd built his firm over 30 years, and he wouldn't let anyone, not even Richard's son, jeopardize that. "Send me what you have," he finally said. "I'll need to review it with our legal counsel." "I'll messenger it over today. There's one more thing, Frank." "What's that?" "Richard wanted me to tell you that he never blamed you for James's behavior. He knew you ran an honest business and that James was hiding this from you." "That sounds like Richard," Frank said quietly. "Always thinking about other people." "Yes," I agreed. "Always thinking about other people. Unlike his children." I hung up and made the next call. Emily's law firm was called Morell and Associates, a small but prestigious practice that handled estates and trusts for wealthy families. Her senior partner was a woman named Catherine Morell, known throughout the legal community for running a tight ship and tolerating absolutely no ethical violations. She'd been practicing law for 35 years and had built her reputation on integrity and discretion. I'd met Catherine twice at firm functions Richard and I attended with Emily. She was in her early 60s, elegant and sharp, the kind of woman who commanded respect without raising her voice. She wore her silver hair in a neat bob and favored dark suits that made her look like a Supreme Court justice. "Mrs. Dawson," Catherine said when her secretary put me through after I explained I needed to speak with her urgently about Emily. "How are you holding up?" "As well as can be expected, thank you. I'm calling about Emily, and what I have to tell you is difficult." "Go on." "I've discovered some billing irregularities involving Richard's accounts. His credit card was charged for legal services that were never rendered, or at least not the services that were claimed. The charges were coded as estate planning consultation and document preparation, but when I reviewed the actual work product with Richard's accountant, we found that Emily was actually billing him for her personal legal matters. Silence on the other end. Not the shocked silence of someone hearing news for the first time, but the calculating silence of someone whose worst suspicions were being confirmed. "How much are we talking about?" Catherine asked. $63,000 over 3 years. I have copies of all the credit card statements, along with notes Richard made about what work was supposedly being done. There's also an email chain where Emily discusses with James how to structure these charges to avoid detection. More silence. I could hear papers rustling, a pen clicking. "I'm not looking to file a formal complaint with the Bar Association," I continued. "Not yet, anyway. But I thought you should be aware. Richard wanted to give Emily a chance to make things right, but he's gone now, and she's made it clear she has no intention of acknowledging what she did. Mrs. Dawson, these are very serious allegations. If true, they constitute theft, fraud, and multiple violations of our professional conduct rules." "I know. That's why I'm calling you instead of going straight to the bar. Richard respected you. He said you were one of the few lawyers he'd ever met who actually had integrity." "Did Richard know about this before he died?" "He discovered it about 8 months ago. He documented everything, but he didn't want to hurt Emily's career while he was alive. He kept hoping she'd come to him, confess, try to make it right. She never did. I'll need to see all the documentation. I'll have it delivered to your office this afternoon, marked confidential and for your eyes only." "Mrs. Dawson, I have to ask, why are you doing this now? Why not wait, grieve, take some time before starting what's essentially a campaign against your stepchildren?" "Because they started it. They made jokes at their father's funeral. They called me a gold digger in front of everyone. They've been stealing from Richard for years, and they think they got away with it. Someone needs to hold them accountable. And you've appointed yourself to that role." "Richard appointed me. He asked me to do this, and I promised him I would." Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "I'll review the materials when they arrive. But I want you to understand something, Mrs. Dawson. If what you're saying is true, Emily's career is over. She'll be disbarred. She'll never practice law again. Are you prepared for that? Are you prepared to have a thief working at your firm? Point taken. Send me everything." I hung up and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my cold coffee, feeling the weight of what I'd just set in motion. 2 phone calls, 2 careers about to implode, 2 lives about to be destroyed. I felt nothing. No guilt, no hesitation, no second thoughts. Richard had made me promise. In those final days, when the morphine made him honest and the pain made him clear about what mattered, he'd grip my hand with what little strength he had left. "They need to understand," he'd whispered, his voice barely audible over the beeping monitors. "They need to know what it feels like." "I know," I'd said. "You're stronger than them. Smarter. You'll do what needs to be done." "Yes." "Promise me." "I promise." He'd died 2 days later, at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was sitting beside his bed, holding his hand, reading to him from one of his favorite books, even though he was unconscious. The monitors started beeping differently, and the nurse came in, and that was it. 57 years of life, over in the space between one breath and the next. James had been at a business dinner. Emily had been at a bar association event. Rebecca had been home watching television. None of them made it to the hospital in time. None of them even tried. The fallout was faster than I expected, though Richard had warned me it would be. He'd known his children, known how they'd react, known exactly where to apply pressure to make them crack. By Wednesday morning, James had been put on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. Frank Patterson was thorough and methodical, and once he saw the evidence, he had no choice. The firm's liability insurance wouldn't cover employees running side businesses using company resources, and the potential lawsuit exposure was massive. I heard about it through town gossip. Linda, Donald's secretary, had a sister who worked at Patterson and Associates, and word spread fast in a small town. By lunchtime, half of Main Street knew that James Dawson was in trouble at work. By Thursday morning, Emily had been called into a meeting with Catherine Morell and 2 other senior partners. I knew because Catherine called me herself. "I've reviewed everything you sent," she said. "It's worse than I thought." "How so?" "Emily didn't just bill Richard fraudulently. She used client trust funds to cover personal expenses and then repaid them with Richard's money. That's commingling, which is one of the fastest ways to get disbarred." "What happens now?" "We're terminating her employment immediately. I'm also required to report this to the Bar Association. There will be an investigation, a hearing, and almost certainly a disbarment." "How long will that take?" 6 months, maybe a year, but the outcome isn't in doubt. The evidence is overwhelming." "Thank you for taking this seriously, Catherine." "I'm not doing this for you, Mrs. Dawson. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. But I want you to know something." "What's that?" "You're destroying these people. You understand that, right? Not just their careers, but their entire lives. Everything they've built, everything they've worked for, it's all going to crumble." "Good." "That's a hard thing to say about your stepchildren. They're hard people who did hard things to someone I loved. This is justice." "Is it, or is it revenge? Does it matter?" Catherine was silent for a moment. "No, I suppose it doesn't. Just be careful, Margaret. Desperate people do desperate things." She hung up and I sat with that warning, turning it over in my mind. Would they get desperate? Would they come after me directly? I didn't care. Let them try. Rebecca called me that evening, right as I was making dinner. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "You're destroying their lives," she said without preamble. Her sweet voice had vanished, replaced by something raw and vicious. "I'm just making sure people know about it." He was senile. The cancer had spread to his brain. He didn't know what he was doing. The medical records say otherwise. Dr. Peterson documented Richard's mental competency right up until the end. He was lucid, aware, and fully capable of making decisions. "We'll sue you for defamation, for harassment, for everything we can think of." "Please do. I'd love to see all of this presented in open court, with testimony and evidence, and a judge deciding who's telling the truth." "You're making a mistake." "No, Rebecca. Your husband made the mistake. Emily made the mistake. She committed fraud and theft. You made the mistake. You enabled both of them and probably helped them plan it. Now you're all going to pay for those mistakes. We'll fight this. You'll lose, but you're welcome to try." She hung up and I went back to making dinner. Chicken and rice, simple and comforting. I ate alone at the kitchen table, the same spot where Richard and I had shared thousands of meals. The silence didn't bother me anymore. I'd gotten used to it, even found a strange comfort in it. After dinner, I washed the dishes and sat in the living room with a book, one of Richard's mystery novels that I'd never gotten around to reading. But I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept drifting to Emily and James, imagining their panic, their desperation, their growing realization that everything was slipping away. Part of me felt satisfied, but another part, a part I didn't want to examine too closely, felt nothing at all, just cold, empty space where emotions should be. Was this what revenge felt like? This hollow satisfaction, this absence of feeling? Richard had warned me about that too. "It won't make you happy," he'd said near the end. "Watching them suffer won't bring me back or fix what they did." "I know, but it needs to be done anyway." "Yes. You'll become someone different, someone harder. Can you live with that?" I'd thought about that question for a long time before answering. Yes, I can live with that. Now, sitting alone in the quiet house, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. But it was too late to turn back. The machinery was in motion, grinding forward with unstoppable momentum. Friday morning brought snow, heavy and wet, the kind that sticks to everything, and makes the world look clean and new even when it's not. I was shoveling the driveway when a car pulled up, a rental sedan with Massachusetts plates. Emily got out, wearing a long black coat and dark sunglasses, even though the sky was overcast. She looked thin, almost gaunt, like she'd lost 10 pounds in the past week. Her hair, usually styled perfectly, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. "We need to talk," she said. I kept shoveling. "Then talk. Inside. No, whatever you have to say, you can say it here." She looked around the empty street, at the houses with their windows dark and curtained, at the falling snow that muffled sound and created the illusion of privacy. "You've ruined me," she said flatly. "Catherine fired me yesterday. The Bar Association opened an investigation this morning. My lawyer says I'll be disbarred within 6 months. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate, that's all you have to say." "What do you want me to say, Emily? That I'm sorry?" "I'm not. You tried to have him declared incompetent so you could control his money. You billed him for legal services you never provided. Those are facts, not opinions. We were going to pay him back." "When?" She took off her sunglasses, and I saw her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "Why are you doing this? What do you get out of destroying us?" "I get to keep a promise I made to your father. He wanted this. He wanted you to ruin our lives. He wanted you to understand consequences. He wanted you to learn that you can't treat people like garbage and expect no repercussions. He spent your whole lives protecting you, enabling you, making excuses for you, and you repaid him by stealing from him and planning to lock him away so you could spend his money. We never went through with that plan. Only because he got cancer first. If he'd stayed healthy, you would have done it. Don't lie to me, Emily. Don't lie to yourself." She stood there in the falling snow, and I watched something break in her. Her shoulders sagged, her face crumpled, and she started crying. Not delicate tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. "I loved him," she said between gasps. "He was my father, and I loved him." "You had a funny way of showing it." "I know, God, I know. I was stupid and selfish and greedy, and I can't take it back. But please, Margaret, please stop this. You've made your point. We understand. We'll do whatever you want." "There's nothing you can do. It's too late." "It's not too late. I'll confess everything. I'll make a public apology. I'll pay back every penny, even if it takes the rest of my life. Apologies and repayment don't mean anything now." "Then what do you want? Revenge? Is that it? You want us to suffer the way Dad suffered?" "Yes, that's exactly what I want." "That's sick." "Maybe, but it's what your father asked me to do, and I keep my promises. I'm holding people accountable for their actions. There's a difference." Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "James lost his job. Rebecca left him. He's living in that big house all alone, and he can't afford the payments. The bank is going to foreclose." "I know." "You know? You've been keeping track." "Of course I have. I want to make sure you both understand exactly what you've lost." "You're a monster." "No, I'm just someone who loved your father more than you did." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. The tears stopped, and her face went hard and cold. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "James and I are going to fight this. We're going to expose you for what you are." "And what am I?" "A manipulative woman who poisoned our father against us." "Good luck proving that. Every piece of evidence, every document, every witness statement supports my version of events. Your father documented everything. He was meticulous about it. We'll find a way. You won't, because there isn't one. You're guilty, Emily. You committed crimes, multiple crimes, and now you're facing the consequences." She put her sunglasses back on and walked to her car without another word. I watched her drive away, then went back to shoveling snow. My hands were cold, my back ached, and I felt tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. But I kept shoveling, clearing the driveway one scoop at a time, because that's what you do. You keep moving forward. You finish what you start. By mid-morning, James's car appeared in my driveway. He got out slowly, like a man who'd aged 10 years in a week. He was wearing jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt, no coat despite the cold. His face was unshaven, his eyes hollow. "Can I come in?" he asked. "No." "Please, I just want to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "There's everything to talk about. You're destroying my life." "You destroyed your own life when you stole from your father." "I made a mistake." "One mistake. Does that really deserve all this?" "It wasn't one mistake. It was dozens of mistakes, made over years, with full knowledge of what you were doing. You're not a child, James. You're a grown man who made conscious choices. I'll go to the police. I'll turn myself in. I'll confess everything." "That won't help you now." "Then what will?" "Nothing. It's too late." He stood there, swaying slightly, and I realized he'd been drinking. His eyes were red, his speech just a little too careful, the way drunks sound when they're trying to hide it. "Don't." "Why not? I've lost everything. My job, my wife, my house, my reputation. What's left?" "Your life. Your chance to be better than you were." "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one whose world is falling apart." "No, I'm the one whose husband died while his children were too busy to sit with him. I'm the one who had to watch someone I loved suffer and know that his own children didn't care enough to be there." "Don't talk to me about falling apart, James. You don't know what that means." He looked at me, with something like hatred, pure and undiluted. "I hope you're happy." "I'm not, but I'm satisfied. There's a difference." "What difference?" "Happiness is fleeting. Satisfaction lasts." He got back in his car and drove away, weaving slightly as he pulled out of the driveway. I should have been worried he'd hurt someone, driving drunk like that, but I wasn't. I just watched him go and felt nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the windows. Richard's side of the bed was empty, cold, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I thought about Emily and James, about what they were going through, about how their lives were imploding. I thought about Rebecca leaving, about careers ending, about reputations destroyed. I waited for guilt to come, for regret, for some kind of emotional response that would tell me I was still human, still capable of compassion. Nothing came, just emptiness. Maybe that was the price of revenge. Maybe this was what Richard had warned me about. You become someone else, someone harder, someone who can watch people suffer and feel nothing. I'd become that person, and I couldn't bring myself to care. Winter dragged on through March, cold and grey and relentless. The snow piled up, then melted, then came back again. The town settled into its rhythm, but underneath the surface, everyone was talking about the Dawson family drama. Small towns thrive on gossip, and this was the juiciest story anyone had heard in years. I went to the grocery store and felt eyes following me down the aisles. I went to the bank and heard conversation stop when I walked in. I went to the post office and saw people whispering behind their hands. Some of them thought I was justified. Some thought I was cruel. Most of them just wanted to see what would happen next. Donald called me in late March with news. "James has filed for bankruptcy," he said. "Both personal and business. He's listing debts of over $400,000. "The house?" "Bank took it last week. He's living in an apartment on the other side of town, one of those extended stay places near the highway." "And Emily?" "She's moved back home, living with her mother's sister in Portland. The bar investigation is moving forward. Her lawyer filed a motion to delay, but it was denied." "Good. Margaret, I have to ask, how far are you planning to take this?" "As far as it needs to go. They're already destroyed. Their careers are over. Their finances are ruined. Their reputations are shot. What more do you want?" "I want them to understand what they did, really understand it, not just intellectually, but in their bones. I want them to wake up every morning and feel what their father felt when he realized his own children were stealing from him. That's not justice, that's vengeance. Call it whatever you want. Donald was quiet for a moment. You know, Richard talked to me about this before he died. He said you'd be ruthless about it. He said you had the strength to do what needed doing. He was right. He also said he worried about what it would cost you. Not financially, but personally. He said revenge has a way of eating people from the inside out. I'll take that risk. Will you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've already paid a price. You've become someone Richard wouldn't recognize. Richard knew exactly who I'd become. He asked me to become this person. He needed me to become this person. And now that he's gone, who are you doing this for? Him or yourself? I didn't answer because I didn't know. Maybe it didn't matter. After I hung up with Donald, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the notebook Richard had left me, the leather-bound journal with all his instructions. I'd followed every step so far, executed his plan with precision and care. But there were more pages, more instructions, more ways to make his children suffer. The next phase involved their social circles. Richard had compiled a list of Emily's colleagues at the Bar Association, people she'd worked with on committees and boards. He'd also listed James's professional contacts, the network of real estate brokers and developers who'd helped him build his career. The instructions were simple. Make sure everyone knew what Emily and James had done. Not through direct confrontation, but through careful, strategic information sharing. A word here, a document there, a quiet conversation that planted seeds of doubt and disgust. Richard had even written scripts for me to follow, suggestions for how to phrase things, what to emphasize, how to make sure the message stuck. It was masterful and terrible at the same time. I started with Emily's professional network. There was a woman named Patricia Hendricks who served on the Bar Association's ethics committee with Emily. She was in her 50s, known for being fair but strict, the kind of person who took professional conduct seriously. I called her on a Monday morning. Mrs. Hendricks, my name is Margaret Dawson. You may have heard about the investigation involving Emily Dawson. I'm not supposed to discuss pending disciplinary matters. I understand. I'm not asking you to discuss the investigation. I'm calling because Emily and I were family, and I thought you should know some context that might not be in the official record. There was a pause. What kind of context? She knew he was terminal. She knew he had maybe months left, and she still chose to steal from him, to bill him fraudulently, to take advantage of him during the most vulnerable time of his life. That's awful. It is, and I think it speaks to character in a way that transcends the technical aspects of the ethics complaint. This wasn't a mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. Why are you telling me this? Because the Bar Association needs to know who Emily really is. Not just what she did, but the kind of person who could do it. Richard trusted her. He loved her, and she betrayed that trust in the cruelest way possible. I appreciate you calling, Mrs. Dawson. This information will be taken into consideration. I made similar calls over the next week. Emily's former colleagues at Morell and Associates, people she'd worked with on estate planning cases, even some of her law school classmates who still practiced in Maine. I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I just told them the truth in a way that made Emily look as bad as possible. For James, I took a different approach. His network was more business-focused, more transactional. These were people who cared about reliability and trust because money was on the line. I called Frank Patterson first. Frank, it's Margaret. I wanted to thank you for handling the situation with James so professionally. It's been difficult. James worked here for 5 years. I hate to see it end this way. I understand. Richard would have hated it too. But there's something else you should know. What's that? James has been spreading rumors that the evidence against him was fabricated. He's telling people that I manipulated Richard into writing those letters and creating those documents. That's not true. I know, you've seen the evidence. You know it's real. But he's trying to salvage his reputation by destroying mine. And I thought you should be aware in case he contacts any of your clients or colleagues. I appreciate the heads up. If James tries to interfere with our business relationships, we'll take legal action. Thank you, Frank. Richard always said you were a man of integrity. I made more calls. Developers James had worked with, property owners he'd represented, even the bank that had foreclosed on his house, just to make sure they understood the full scope of his financial misconduct. By the end of March, both Emily and James were pariahs in their respective professional communities. Word had spread, reputations were destroyed, every door was closed, and I felt nothing. Just that same cold satisfaction, that hollow sense of accomplishment. April brought rain instead of snow, cold and grey and endless. The garden started to show signs of life, bulbs pushing through the soggy earth. But I couldn't bring myself to care. I'd let the garden go since Richard died, let the weeds take over and the beds turn wild. Rebecca showed up on a Thursday afternoon, driving a new car, an expensive SUV that screamed divorce settlement. She knocked on the door, and when I opened it, she had that old fake smile back in place. Margaret, we need to talk about ending this. There's nothing to end. It's already done. James is falling apart. He's drinking constantly. He's talking about suicide again. Do you want that on your conscience? James is an adult. His choices are his own. You've driven him to this. No, I just made sure there were consequences. What if he actually does it? That's not my responsibility. Rebecca's smile vanished. You're a monster. So I've been told. Is there anything else? I want you to know that I'm meeting with a lawyer next week. We're going to file a lawsuit against you for harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and defamation. Good luck with that. Everything I've said is true and documented. You can't defame someone by telling the truth. We'll see what a jury thinks. Please do file that lawsuit. I'd love to see all of this played out in open court, with depositions and testimony and evidence. I'd love to watch James explain under oath why he stole from his father. I'd love to hear Emily justify billing fraud. By all means, make this as public as possible. Rebecca stared at me, and I saw the calculation in her eyes. She was weighing options, looking for leverage, trying to find a weakness. What do you want? She finally asked. There has to be something. Everyone wants something. I want them to suffer. That's all. That's the only thing I want. For how long? Forever. That's insane. Maybe, but it's honest. She left without another word, and I watched her drive away in her expensive SUV, back to whatever life she'd built away from James and his problems. That evening, Susan called me. She was my lawyer, but over the past months, she'd become something close to a friend, or at least someone who checked on me regularly. Rebecca called me today, Susan said. She's threatening to sue you. I know, she told me. Margaret, you need to take this seriously. Even if her case is weak, you could end up spending tens of thousands of dollars defending yourself. Let her sue, I have nothing to hide. That's not the point. The point is that you're escalating a situation that's already gone too far. How far is too far? You've destroyed two people's careers and reputations. Their finances are ruined. Their relationships are shattered. They're living in apartments and filing for bankruptcy. What more do you want? I want them to understand what they did to Richard. Do you really think they don't understand by now? I think they understand they got caught. That's not the same as understanding the harm they caused. Susan was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. Do you still love Richard, or has this consumed you so much that it's become about something else? I love him every day. That's why I'm doing this. Are you sure? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're punishing yourself as much as you're punishing them. How am I punishing myself? Look at your life, Margaret. You never go anywhere. You don't see friends. You spend all your time planning your next move against Emily and James. You've turned revenge into a full-time job. Richard asked me to do this. And you've done it. You've fulfilled your promise. But now he's gone, and you're still here, still alive, and you're wasting what's left of your life on people who aren't worth your time or energy. I'm keeping a promise. You're hiding from grief. There's a difference. I hung up because I didn't want to hear any more. I didn't want to examine my motivations or question my choices. I wanted to keep moving forward, keep executing Richard's plan, keep making his children suffer. But Susan's words stayed with me. Was I hiding from grief? Had this become something other than what Richard wanted? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. May brought warmth and sunshine, the kind of spring days that make you remember why you live in Maine. The trees burst into green, the flowers bloomed, the world came alive after the long winter. I started working in the garden again, not because I particularly wanted to, but because it gave me something to do besides think. I pulled weeds and planted new flowers and tried to restore some order to the chaos. James showed up one afternoon while I was working. He pulled into the driveway in an old pickup truck, rusty and battered, nothing like the BMW he used to drive. He got out slowly, like his body hurt, and walked toward me. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Talk? I need you to stop." "Stop what?" "All of it. The calls, the rumors, the campaign against us. I need it to end." "It's already ended. I've done what I set out to do." "Then why are people still calling me, asking questions about Dad? Why did my former colleague tell me you contacted him last week?" "I was tying up loose ends." "There are no loose ends. You've destroyed us completely. There's nothing left to destroy." I stood up, pulling off my gardening gloves. "How does it feel?" "What?" "Losing everything, having nothing left, knowing that you did this to yourself and there's no way to fix it. How does it feel?" "It feels like hell." "Good. Now you know what your father felt when he discovered what you were doing." "I've apologized. I've confessed. I've paid for my mistakes. What more do you want?" "I want you to live with it, every day, for the rest of your life." James looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not anger, not hatred, but something deeper, something like despair. "Rebecca was right," he said quietly. "You are a monster." If that's what it takes to keep my promise to Richard, then yes, I'm a monster. Dad wouldn't have wanted this. He loved us. Even after everything, he still loved us. You're right. He did love you. That's what makes what you did so much worse. You had his love, his trust, his support, and you threw it all away for money you didn't even need. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you lost? Every day, every single day. Good. He left after that, and I went back to my gardening. But my hands were shaking, and I couldn't focus. I kept seeing the look on his face, that deep, soul-crushing despair. Was that what I wanted? Was that the goal? Yes, I realized. That was exactly what I wanted. I wanted them to feel what Richard felt. I wanted them to understand loss and betrayal and regret. And now they did. That night, I took out Richard's notebook and read through the remaining pages. There were still more steps, more ways to hurt Emily and James, more opportunities to make them suffer. But I was tired, bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. I closed the notebook and put it back in the safe. Maybe Susan was right. Maybe I'd done enough. Maybe it was time to let go. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I was sure they understood. Not until I was absolutely certain they'd learned their lesson. June arrived with perfect weather, warm days and cool nights. The kind of summer that tourists pay good money to experience. The town filled with out-of-staters, families on vacation, couples escaping the city heat. I saw Emily one afternoon at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, looking thin and worn, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt instead of her usual professional attire. Her cart was half empty, filled with cheap staples, pasta, rice, canned soup. She saw me and froze. "Margaret," she said. "Emily." We stood there for a moment, two women who'd once been family, now just strangers who shared a history of pain. "I'm leaving," Emily said, "moving to California. My aunt has a friend who owns a restaurant, and they need someone to manage the front of house. It's not law, but it's work." "Good luck." "That's it. Just good luck." "What else do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Maybe that you're satisfied now. Maybe that you've won and you're done destroying us." "I am satisfied, and I am done." "Really?" "Because it doesn't feel done. It feels like you'll be watching us forever, waiting for us to step out of line so you can crush us again." "I won't be watching. I'll be living my life." "What life? You've spent the last 6 months consumed by revenge. You've turned hatred into your whole identity." "I've kept a promise to someone I loved." "And what did it cost you?" "Nothing I wasn't willing to pay." Emily looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes that looked almost like pity. "I feel sorry for you," she said. "You won, but you lost something important in the process. You lost yourself." She walked away, and I stood there in the produce section, holding a bag of apples, wondering if she was right. Had I lost myself? Had I become so focused on revenge that I'd forgotten who I was before all this started? I didn't know. I couldn't remember who that person had been. The Margaret Dawson, who existed before Richard died, seemed like a stranger now, someone distant and naive. That night, I called Susan. "I think I'm done," I said. "Done with what?" "All of it. The revenge, the campaign against Emily and James, everything. I'm done." "What changed?" "I saw Emily today. She's leaving town, starting over somewhere else. And I realize that I've done what Richard asked. I've made them understand. I've made them pay for what they did." "And how do you feel?" "Empty." "That's revenge for you. It never fills the hole it promises to fill." Richard warned me about that. "Did he?" "He said I'd become someone different, someone harder. He asked if I could live with that." "Can you?" "I don't know yet, but I need to try to find out who I am now, without this consuming me." Susan was quiet for a moment. "That's going to be difficult. You've spent 6 months defining yourself by this revenge. Taking it away leaves a void." "I'll figure it out." "Will you?" "Because I'm worried about you, Margaret. I'm worried about what happens when the anger fades and you're left with just grief." "The grief has always been there. The anger just covered it up for a while." "Then maybe it's time to face it." "Maybe." After I hung up, I sat in the living room, in Richard's chair, surrounded by his books and his tools and all the things he'd made. The house was full of him, every corner marked by his presence. I'd spent 6 months fighting for him, avenging him, keeping my promise to him. But I hadn't spent any time actually mourning him. I hadn't let myself cry, hadn't let myself feel the full weight of his absence. I'd been too busy being angry, too focused on making his children suffer. Now, in the quiet evening light, I finally let myself feel it. The loss, the emptiness, the knowledge that he was gone and never coming back. I cried for the first time since his funeral. Deep, wrenching sobs that left me gasping and exhausted. I cried for what we'd had and what we'd lost. I cried for the life we'd built and the future we'd never have. And when the tears finally stopped, I felt lighter somehow. Not happy, not healed, but less burdened. Maybe this was the beginning of letting go. Maybe this was what came after revenge. July was hot and humid, the kind of weather that makes you want to stay inside with the air conditioning running. But I forced myself to get out, to see people, to remember that there was a world beyond my grief and anger. I started having coffee with Linda, Donald's secretary, who'd been trying to befriend me for months. She was kind and funny and talked about normal things. Her grandchildren, her garden, the local theatre production she was involved in. It felt strange at first, talking about mundane topics, pretending life was normal. But slowly, it started to feel real again. Like maybe I could be a person who cared about gardens and grandchildren and amateur theatre. I didn't hear anything about Emily or James for weeks. They'd both left town, moved away to start over somewhere else. The gossip had moved on to other scandals, other dramas. The town had forgotten about the Dawson family mess. But I hadn't. I couldn't. In early August, I got a letter. It was addressed in Emily's handwriting, forwarded from her aunt's house in Portland. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. Dear Margaret, I'm writing this from California, where I'm trying to build a new life. It's hard, every day is hard, but I'm trying. I want you to know that I understand now what Dad tried to tell us. Not the specifics of what we did wrong, but the deeper truth about what matters in life. We spent so much time focused on money and status and success that we forgot about the people who loved us. We forgot about Dad, who built his whole life around making sure we had opportunities. We forgot about you, who took care of him when we couldn't be bothered. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't change what happened, but I need you to know that I understand now. I understand what we lost, and it wasn't just careers or money or reputations. We lost our father's respect. We lost his love, even though he tried to hold on to it until the end. You were right to do what you did. We needed to face consequences. We needed to understand that actions matter, that choices have weight. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that your promise to Dad wasn't in vain. We learned the lesson. It cost us everything, but we learned it. I hope you find peace, Margaret. I hope you can let go of the anger and remember the good parts of your life with Dad. He loved you very much. He told me that once, before he got sick. He said you were the best thing that ever happened to him. I believe that now. I believe he chose the right person to carry out his final wishes. Goodbye, Margaret. Emily, I read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it away. She understood. They both understood. The lesson had been learned, the promise kept. Richard would have been satisfied with that. September brought cool nights and the first hints of autumn. The leaves started to turn. The air smelled like wood smoke, and the tourist season wound down. The town emptied out, returning to its quiet, off-season rhythm. I spent my days working in the garden, preparing it for winter. Physical work that kept my hands busy and my mind occupied. Susan stopped by one afternoon with wine and Chinese takeout. I thought you might want company, she said. We ate at the kitchen table, the same table where Richard and I had shared so many meals. It didn't hurt as much anymore. The memories were still there, but they'd softened around the edges, become less sharp. How are you doing? Susan asked. Better. Not great, but better. Have you heard from Emily or James? Emily sent a letter. She's in California working at a restaurant trying to start over. And James? Nothing. I don't know where he is or what he's doing. Does it bother you, not knowing? No, I think I'm okay with not knowing. I did what Richard asked. The rest is up to them. Susan smiled. That's progress. Is it? Yes. 6 months ago, you needed to know everything. You needed to control every detail of their suffering. Now you're letting go. It doesn't feel like letting go. It just feels like exhaustion. Sometimes those things look the same. We drank our wine and talked about other things. Susan's daughter was getting married. Linda's grandson made the high school football team. The library was having a book sale next month. Normal things, human things. The kind of conversations I'd been avoiding for a year. It felt good, strange, but good. After Susan left, I sat in the living room with Richard's mystery novel, the one I'd tried to read months ago. This time, I made it through 3 chapters before my mind wandered. I thought about Emily's letter, about her saying that Richard had told her I was the best thing that ever happened to him. He'd told me the same thing, many times. Usually late at night, when we were both half asleep, when guards were down and truth came easy. You saved me, he'd said once. After Margaret died, I thought I was done. I thought I'd just coast through the rest of my life alone. Then you came along and reminded me what it felt like to be alive. You saved me too, I'd replied. And he had. I'd been divorced, lonely, convinced I was too old to start over. Then Richard showed up at a community garden meeting, made a joke about tomato hornworms, and suddenly I wasn't alone anymore. 12 years, not enough time, but more than some people get. I closed the book and went to bed, and for the first time in over a year, I slept through the night without waking up. October arrived with cold rain and grey skies. A year had passed since Richard died. A year of grief and anger and revenge, and slowly, finally, acceptance. It was early morning, before anyone else was at the cemetery. I kept my promise, I said to the headstone. I made them understand. I made them pay for what they did to you. The granite was cold under my hand, smooth and impersonal. Not Richard at all. He'd been warm and rough-edged and real. This stone was just a marker, a placeholder for something that couldn't be contained or defined. Emily sent a letter. She gets it now. They both do. I think you'd be satisfied with that. The cemetery was quiet except for that sound, that whisper of decay and change. Susan thinks I lost myself in all this. Maybe I did. Maybe I became someone you wouldn't recognize. But I did what you asked. I kept my word. I stayed there for a long time, sitting on the wet grass beside his grave, talking to him about everything and nothing. The garden, the house, the people in town, all the small details of life that he'd cared about. When I finally left, I felt lighter. Not happy, not healed, but less burdened by the weight of unfulfilled promises. That afternoon, James called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Margaret, it's James. I know. I'm calling because I wanted to tell you something. I'm in Oregon now. I got a job doing construction work, nothing fancy, just honest labor. And I've been going to AA meetings. Good for you. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about understanding what we did to Dad, and I think I finally get it. Do you? Yeah, I lost everything, and it was the best thing that could have happened to me. Because now I know what matters. Not money or status or any of that bullshit. Just being a decent person. Just showing up for the people who matter. Your father tried to teach you that your whole life. I know. I was too stupid to listen, but I'm listening now. It's too late. I know, but I wanted you to know anyway. And I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for destroying your life, for making me face what I'd become, for not letting me get away with it. Dad knew you'd be strong enough to do it. He knew you'd follow through. I didn't know what to say to that. I have to go, James said. I just wanted you to know that you kept your promise. You did what Dad asked, and we're better people for it, even if it cost us everything. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at nothing, processing what he'd said. They understood. They'd learned. The promise was kept. Richard had been right about everything. His children had needed this harsh lesson. They'd needed to lose everything to understand what they'd had, and I'd been the one to teach them. That night, I took Richard's notebook out of the safe and read through it one last time. All his careful plans, all his detailed instructions, all his predictions about how his children would react and what I'd need to do. He'd known me so well. He'd known I'd be strong enough, ruthless enough, dedicated enough to see it through. He'd also known it would change me. That was in there too, in the final pages I'd never quite reached. By the time you read this, it will be over, he'd written. You'll have done what I asked, and you'll be wondering who you've become. I want you to know that I see you, Margaret. I see the person you'll be after all this is finished. You'll be harder, colder, more willing to do what needs doing. But you'll also be free. Free from the anger, free from the obligation, free to live whatever life is left to you. Don't waste it. Don't spend the rest of your days alone in this house, mourning what's gone. I love you too much to want that for you. Live. Be happy. Find joy again. That's my last wish for you. Not revenge on my children. You'll have already done that. But this, live the life you deserve. I closed the notebook and sat there crying, not from grief, but from release, from the knowledge that it was finally, truly over. The promise was kept, the revenge was complete, the lesson was learned. Now I could let go.